I think, for people that look into this subject long enough, they're going to see some threads that have been around for a very long time. I mean, one of the threads is, that when the first crashes happened, we pulled together intelligence, military, and private industry, and we brought those brightest minds together and said, what do we do, and how do we attack this? And one of the things we do to this day is big private companies or even publicly traded companies, but they're still not government companies. It's still not like the military isn't building their own craft somewhere. They use really, really incredible minds at big public or private companies, but they're still kind of operating underneath the Department of Defense, but they're not really a part of the government, but they're doing their own thing, but what they're building they don't really own. It's a really interesting way of how it works. I was amazed when, I have a group out of the 10 advisors that I have, 3 of them are of the brightest scientific and engineering minds in the entire military-industrial complex. These are the guys that work, 9 months out of the year, they work over at Area 51, and that's the truth. And to learn kind of how things are it's so different than what you come up with by reading just all these dumb conspiracy blogs your whole life, which we've all fallen into if you like this stuff, because where else are you going to go? But they might be building something that truly has anti-gravity, but they don't own it, even though they're paying for it, and it's theirs kind of, and it's their own building, but the building's on government land. But it's just really, it's kind of convoluted, but it's an interesting dance, and it's just, I don't know. I find myself, I feel like I'm a kid that's walking in a museum and he's just blown away by every little painting on the wall, and I'm trying to be respectful and not keep asking, too many absurd questions, but I'm hoping that people realize what we're doing is real, and it's going to make its way into these books and into the films, and you're going to learn a whole lot.
Let's talk about the process of how you sort of pierce the veil, because that's what people are going to have trouble buying. How is it this rock star guy gains access to this when so many people, senators and researchers and scientists and spooks who've tried to look for this stuff couldn't find it? How do you get the access? How do you explain that?
Well, let me might as well just tell you the story. So
yeah.
the way the first, it spells this out a little bit in the foreword to the book, but I had an opportunity to go to an event. So the most classified and the most advanced group of engineers and scientists that work within the military-industrial complex work under one specific group, and it's a very, very quiet group. But for the very first time, they were doing an event where family members can come and not go in the buildings, but at least celebrate in the parking lot what their loved ones do during the day, And they asked me, would you come up? And because I knew this one individual that told me to be really careful, he goes, "Hey, look, this is a way for you to come up and see a little bit about what we're doing." And I said, "Oh my God, I would love to." And he said, "Do you want to come and introduce the head of the company to the crowd?" And I said, "I will if I get to sit with him for 5 minutes." I don't know why I said that. I just knew that was an opportunity that guys like me would kill, because I knew exactly who this group of engineers were. I knew exactly what they do, So the head guy, are you kidding me? Yeah, lock me in a room with this dude. And so I got that opportunity. I went up and I did the introduction to the crowd, and then I got the 5 minutes to sit down alone and say whatever it was I wanted to say. So at that time, I didn't say anything about this subject. I just said, "Hey, I have an idea for a project, and this project, I think, if it's done correctly, will reverse the cynicism that people have about government and what people have about the, frankly, the military-industrial complex. I think that if I do this, places like this and other arms of the government would be happy that it got communicated." But I didn't bring up anything that was,
You didn't mention UFOs.
You don't mention UFOs. Don't even do that because you'll get kicked right out of the door. So he goes, okay, that's great. And I said, can I come up in a couple of weeks and tell you more about it? Absolutely. So a couple of weeks go by, then I come back up. I go through 4 layers of security. I go through machine guns, guys with machine guns, and then I get escorted into a very specific building that's with a bunch of buildings. This is somewhere out in the middle of the desert somewhere. And then I go through 2 layers of electronic code entry systems, and then you hear the locks go, they make their sounds and the doors open up. Now I'm in a hallway, and that hallway has speakers lining the ceiling and just playing white noise, kind of like TV static, and that's there so you don't hear anybody's conversations. And the hallway also has a series of doors, and all the doors have kind of like those big rotary locks, like a safe lock on them. So we go through that hallway, and then they just twist the knobs on the doors, and then you hear the big sound, and that door opens up, and now I'm in the center of the building where the top 3 engineers work with the head of the company. And so I walk in, and they're sitting there, and they're ready for what it is I wanted to pitch them. So, I'm nervously trying to figure out what I'm going to say. I had no idea that, I had no plan for even bringing up UFOs then either. I was smarter than that. So we're talking, and one person apparently did a bunch of research on me and knew that I was all into the subject. So halfway through the conversation, this person says, so what about all the conspiracy stuff that you're into? And so now I'm being eyeballed by 3 very important people, and I'm just totally got caught, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do right now? So I tried to talk my way out of it, and then in comes the head of the company, the big dude, and kind of saved the moment, but at the same time, he got introduced to the conversation right at that point. So I said, you come in at a very interesting part of the conversation. This person brought up, the whole UFO issue with me. I just want you to know that I don't plan on, treating that disrespectfully with this project. And then I got interrupted, and the head guy says, we cannot be involved with anything that has anything to do with that subject, especially since there has been absolutely no evidence whatsoever that it exists. So bam, I'm just cut off right there. And now my heart's racing, and I'm like, where do I do? So the only thing that I can think of at the moment is I said, well, Edgar Allan Mitchell, the 6th man to walk on the moon, is out telling all the young people of the world that this is real. So we have a credibility issue that we have to attack, but we don't have to attack it here or now, and we could talk this through. It's just something that young people think, and I want you to know a little bit more about my project. And so I got my way through. I was like, oh, my God, I'm still here. So they said, okay, continue. So that specific meeting ended, and then I just said, hell with it. I said, sir, can I speak to you for 5 minutes alone? This is the Tom that even my old band members know. I'll just go for something. This is the punk rock kid inside of me, right? So, and he goes, sure. And so the other people kind of look at me weird, and they're like, okay, so we leave. And I kind of looked at them, so they did. So they stood up, and I shut the door. And now I'm in the middle of all these different layers of security, and I'm sitting with this person, and I just go for broke. I just go, this is exactly what I said. I want you to understand something. And I sit down 2 feet in front of him, and he's staring at me in the suit. And I go, I understand the national security implications about what I'm about to say. I am not naive to the topic, and I think if you hear me out, you're going to see that there's merit in what I'm about to propose. And he goes, well, what topic are you talking about? And I go, UFOs, sir. Now, this is what I want to try and do. And so then I just laid out this entire Secret Machines project idea. And I said, I'm going to send, and I said, but over the past 30 years, there's been a program to indoctrinate people to the idea that this might be real. But the problem is all the young adults of the world, they use the internet, they have iPhones, they talk to each other much quicker than people ever have. So this program that everyone's been following from the 50s is far outdated. It's antiquated. People have surpassed it, and now they don't trust you guys. Now they don't like you guys. Now they graduate from MIT and they want to work for Elon Musk, and they don't want to work here. Help me help you guys. And he stops me, and because I said, frankly, there's been some bad things that have happened for the past 30 years on this subject, and he stops me, And I'm kind of going, okay, so now I'm in trouble. I just went right into this stuff. What's going to happen? And he looks at me, he takes a breath, and he goes, what kind of bad things has the government done with this subject? Very, very like calm and staring me straight in the eyes. And so I came up with a couple things that I can't say here. And I said, if you allow me to do this, what I'm trying to do, then I'm going to ask you for some help. I need advisors. I need people to help guide me so I don't keep disinforming people. I will not do that anymore. We need to tell the truth. And I just, you know what I said at the time? I said, you got to picture those little chickens running across the road and someone's guiding them. I'm that little chicken, and I'm racing, but I don't want to get hit by a car along the way, you know. And but it was no joke. When there was nothing to laugh at during this time. So I said, I'm going to send you something. I want you to read it, and please, if you find anything about it good, you know, if there's any kind of merit in this at all, I would just respond any way you can, because I didn't think you could respond in an email or anything. He goes, okay, thank you for that. And then the meeting was done. So what I did was, the nonfiction books that we've been working on right next to the Secret Machines novel in parallel it's a thesis of the UFO phenomenon. So I took the prologue to that thesis and I sent it to him. And I'm sitting there going, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? I shouldn't have sent it in an email. Obviously, you don't send it in an email. Every email you have with this group, it has all these like government, stamps all over the email, because it goes through DoD servers and all this stuff. But I had no other way to get it to him, so I did. So I just sat there, and I didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks. I was like, okay, that relationship's done. I fried that thing. I went in there talking about, I tell people it's like walking into somebody during World War II and say, hey, about that nuclear bomb you're building in secret, I want to talk to you about that. That's basically what I did. Well, 2 weeks later, I get this email, and it says, I want you to be next to the Pentagon at this date and this time. You're going to be meeting somebody from the CIA, basically. It said it in a different way, but I can't say what it said. And so I was like, oh my God, like it's working. So I get on a plane, and I fly out to D.C. And this is where it gets pretty sketchy, but it was insane. So I go to my meeting. I had to go to a very specific location that was within a rock's throw of the Pentagon, and I go to the back of a room at a certain location, and there's two guys in suits waiting at a table for me. So I go and I sit down at the table, and the person I was talking to is one of the persons, and he goes, I think this would be a good time for you to tell this person what you told me. And I'm sitting there kind of in my mind, I'm going, well, what do I say? Do I tell him everything I told you, or some of the things? Am I allowed to tell him that I told you these things? Or I had no idea what to say, so I said, okay, I'll just go for it. So I went through the exact same pitch. So I talked for about 20-some minutes because they were just eyeballing me like hawks, So I at this point, I just don't know. I've never been in these situations before, so I didn't know if I was saying the wrong thing or not, but I was just trying to be very respectful, and I went through with it. And I finished my speech, and the person is just staring at me. I mean, these squinting eyes, the beard, the suit, looks exactly straight out of a movie, an espionage movie. Takes a breath and goes, things like this don't happen at the White House. They don't happen at the Hill. They happen in places like this, at tables like this, where a few men get together and decide to push the ball down the field. And then the meeting was done. Done, like a movie done. So the very next day, I got sent over to NASA. And I'm at the highest levels at NASA. I decided to do the same thing where I ask everyone to leave. So this one person, I did the pitch one more time, and they said, you need to meet somebody. So that person flies out to San Diego. I go to another meeting. We get on a conference call, and this person is a very important in the military. Can't say which branch, but the highest level of ranks. But then after they left that particular branch of the military, they did something very, very important for another agency. And that person says, come fly and meet me up here in San Francisco. So within the next 48 hours. So I got on a plane and I go there. And now I'm sitting on a NASA Ames. NASA has three divisions. There's Ames Research, JPL, and then just NASA, the traditional NASA that everyone knows. I'm at Ames Research Center. And I go through my whole pitch again, and this person stops me and goes, I just want you to know I'm a skeptic on this stuff. And I said, I understand that, sir, but I knew you would say that, but let me just continue and tell you what I'm trying to do. 20 minutes later, I just want you to know I'm a skeptic. And I go, I know you are. You already said that, you know. And I keep talking, and by the time I got to kind of concluding what this project would be, he just staring at me. And then he takes a deep breath and says, introduce him to the general. And then I was like, well, who's that? And they're both just staring at me because there was this guy that was right next to him, a very serious guy. And I all of a sudden on my email 2 hours later, I'm talking to somebody that has changed the entire course of this whole project. So I get on the phone with that person that same evening, and I go through the same situation. So I'm starting to walk through what I'm trying to do and how I plan to do it. And this person goes, I want you to know I'm a skeptic on this stuff. And I go, sir, I knew you would say that, but let me explain a little bit more. So I walk through it again, and then the person goes, I just got to say it, I'm a skeptic. You know, it was verbatim what
they
I
all
heard.
do it, right? They all do it.
They all do it. But on the third time, he goes, I swore an oath to my country. And I said, sir, I know you did. And I'm not asking for you to give me classified information. I don't deserve it. But I think if you understand what I'm about to do with this project, you may think it deserves your attention. And then he goes, I'm afraid what you might find is a bunch of men in suits standing around an elephant. And I said, I was afraid you were going to say that, but can you help me? And he says, fly out and meet me. And that's where
things get interesting.
This is where things get interesting. So I fly out.
I'll tell you what, Tom, we're going to take a break here in a minute.
When I got connected to the general, that was a big, big breakthrough. And before I talk a little bit more about how I got more trust from these guys, what happened is I was up at NASA Ames. I got connected to a very specific person, and that person had me fly out and meet them. So this is where it gets really interesting. So I go out to a certain city, and I land at the airport, and I walk through security, and I meet this person. The person takes me to a restaurant that's right past security, and I go to the back of the restaurant. There's nobody in that area, and we sit at a booth for 2 hours. And while we're sitting there, he leans across the table, and this is the very first words that were said to me. It was the Cold War, and every single day we lived under the threat of nuclear war. Every single day we believed and really thought in the deepest part of our souls that nuclear war could happen at any given moment. And then he stops, and he goes, and somewhere in those years, and he looked me in the eye, he goes, we found a life form. And everything that we did and every decision that we made with that life form was because of the consciousness at that time. And I said, sir, when taking into account things that this life form has done, for example, turning our nuclear weapons on and readying them for launch, and then he interrupts me, puts a finger in my face and says, there are heroes in Russia, heroes. And under grave risk to himself and to his country, they did not fire back. And at that moment, I realized it already started. This new game I was in of working with people in like a dance of words, and information was already coming. There was no like small talk. Like we didn't just sit down and just say, hey, let's have a beer and let's like get to know each other.
So let's jump back to that. Let's jump back to that conversation. It was the Cold War. I mean, he's given you sort of the setting for how the cover-up, or what we'd call the cover-up, began.
Yeah, so this is very important for people to remember, and this is where I'm so excited to start chopping down all these pathetic conspiracies that I was involved in as well. It was the Cold War. He's saying that every day they really thought about the annihilation of all mankind with these, weapons that were hundreds or thousands of times bigger than what we dropped on Japan, and we had 20,000 each of those things. And all of a sudden something falls on their laps that's just extraordinary, But even further than that, if you really hear what I'm saying about the nuclear weapons, the UFOs were turning our weapons on, and just so Russia could pick up that we're firing our missiles and fire theirs first. It was a big chess game. So these guys went into complete secrecy to start coming up with a defense system against this phenomenon. Now, I try to tell people some analogies on this. Imagine if someone from the CIA came to your house and sat on your couch and says, "Hey, I want to tell you about that nuclear weapon that they tried to smuggle in through Canada 2 months ago. And I also want to tell you about this, virus that almost got released in Los Angeles. And I want to, all these they're not going to do that, because they're going to be busy trying to figure out to find the people that did it, or to seal off the borders, or to come up with a game plan to get better defensive measures across our our country, and whatever they're doing. That's how this is. That's how big this issue is. They're not worried about if you and I totally understand, because they're too busy trying to understand it and come up with a way to defend against it. And at the same time, they really want people to understand this, to know these things, but they don't want it to mess up their efforts. The more that I started to find out, I thought it was a pretty heroic tale, that these were really good men and women. Do you know that in that first conversation that I had with that general, during the 2 hours, I didn't even leave the airport. I was in this back booth, and then I'd go through security, get on a plane, and go right back home. It was a crazy meeting, but during that, he must have brought up what was best for the quote, best for the republic, best for the free republic. He brought that up probably 8 different times. It's very, very, very important to these men what is best for the United States as a free country, free-thinking man, and the republic that we built. They're not these crazies running around trying to war. They're not warmongers, Very smart. This person has multiple PhDs, and I wish I could tell you who he is and what he. There was nobody above him. There's nobody. Maybe a couple, but when you look at the divisions of how the Department of Defense works, and this specific division, it's just extraordinary that I have this contact. So I started using that as much as I could. So taking it from that point, we talked for 2 hours, and I said, "Sir, I need an advisory committee." And we walked through what I need and why. And so he went out and got the advisors for me. What was really interesting about this is that I started getting advisors that were in different areas, people that deal with space, people that deal with intelligence, people that deal with biowarfare, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily think I should need, but I got them, and now I had the ability to start pulling these people together, and I had this one really interesting contact out in Washington, D.C. that was connected to the highest levels of government. That's how I can say it. And so I was able to pull off a coup in regards to what anybody in this field has ever been able to pull off, which was a conversation with not only my advisors, the most important group of the advisors, and somebody representing basically the highest levels of the land, and talking about how do we do something to help the youth understand that this is a reality, but that they're doing really good work, and they could use the empowerment. They could use the citizens of the United States and the world understanding why it's been kept secret, and that they're not doing it out of malicious reasons. They're doing it because it's an ongoing task. It's an ongoing issue. and they don't fully understand it yet. But they're trying their hardest and spending lots of money and have the brightest minds that they can find, and they're building things, and they're having breakthroughs that I think, frankly, we would all be incredibly proud of as a nation of what they've done.
Obviously it's a spin. They're telling you a version that they want told, but it's a story you wanted to tell. It's part of your pitch to them is, look, you guys look bad, especially to young people who think there's been a cover-up on this subject. People are demanding full disclosure. There's a growing movement and a growing call for that. You guys painted yourself into a corner, and it's time to look for a way out, and this is one. So, obviously you're concerned that you're being used, aren't you?
Well, you know what? People have asked me that, and I'll say no, and let me tell you why. Because I sought these people out, and I asked them a very direct question, and I get a very direct answer. There is no like, hey, why don't you say this? Have you ever thought of this? And I don't get information for no reason at all. It's a very formal approach the way I do things. I'll say, why has it been kept secret? I'll say, in the book, the craft that our pilot character learns how to fly is a real craft. And so I'll say, sir, I need guidance on the science of this, and I will get that answer back, And it's not, I never get information that I don't specifically ask for. So this whole project is not meant to sell people on the idea that this stuff's real. Sorry, I said a bad word. Hopefully we got that delay set up here. I am still me, but I don't go in here and I'm not trying to make this project convince people of the reality of the phenomenon. I'm doing a project to tell people the reasons it's been kept secret and what has happened, what they're dealing with, the breakthroughs that we had, and I think the specific things that I've always wanted to know, and if I think everybody learns these things, they're going to feel a hell of a lot more proud about our country and about the Department of Defense and what they're doing, because this one subject deals with religion, cosmology, physics, science, secrecy, the way we run our country, the relationships we have with other countries, relationships we have with other countries we're not supposed to have relationships with, but we actually kind of still do because of this issue. And that stuff's empowering. That's really empowering to know, for the whole next generation of people that are going to grow up and take over all these countries when we're all long gone. I think that this kind of subject can unify in so many areas beyond so many other other subjects that are out there.
Did you get the sense that this group had ever met before? Had had a sort of the gathering or the conference call, or was in regular communication? The main,
who I refer to as the general, I know has dealings with all these people. Most of them, out of the 10, at certain times. Some of them no. A few of them I got through different routes. The way I look at it, it's interesting that when you look at the way the government is set up when it goes into subjects like this, and you look at the way it's managed, it makes perfect sense. So, we all grew up in this topic thinking, Majestic 12 and this secret shadow government. It's not really like that. Now, you have groups within the military that are doing R&D, that are coming up with and analyzing intelligence. So, the National Reconnaissance Office will analyze the entire electromagnetic spectrum of space, and they'll see things buzzing around and doing stuff. They take that down. Then, the Air Material Command will, look at that stuff and say, okay, what do we build to defend against that? Then the research labs will say, okay, well, this is how we'll build it. And then the CIA will have a bunch of guys that are just analyzing, abduction reports or cattle mutilations or other things that are happening in the real world. And all these divisions are all doing their own stuff, and there's probably a very, very, very small group of people that are sitting at the top and putting it all together. I was told that I asked a very specific question. I was, sir, this is exactly, it's funny because I talk that way, but I literally said that. I go, sir, is there anybody standing back and looking at the big picture? You have abductions, you have cattle mutilations, you have, spacecraft zipping through orbit, you have these crashes, you have all these things. And at one point it was, no, it's a grab bag of scientists. Nobody's looking at the big picture, which is really interesting to me because I wonder if, and I don't know all the answers yet, and I'm still taking my time asking the right questions, but it makes me almost feel like, some crazy things happened back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, and we put together a really strong effort to study the stuff, but I think that most of the stuff has been out of reach, so we don't have some major MJ-12 program per se. I think we have many programs that are dealing with different aspects of this when they happen, when a crash may happen. Let me tell you a conversation I had. So I flew out to Colorado Springs, which is where Air Force Space Command is, and also the Air Force Academy. And I was sitting on the deck of a very highly ranked person, and then we brought in, this is one of my advisors, and then we brought in another advisor that was I'm trying to figure out ways to tell who these guys are, but of the highest rank again. And they said, well, what do you, I said, I'm going to be talking about the crashes in the 40s. There was a pause, and he says, why just the 40s? Gets you thinking a little bit. And then they said, well, what do you need? And I said, well, I think I need someone from the Defense Intelligence Agency. And they say, why? And I say, well, I don't want to make anyone angry. I'm not looking to piss anyone off. I'm not looking to ruffle feathers, break a story. I think if I do my project correctly, it'll do good. And they take a pause, and they're looking at me, and now I'm kind of going, well, what did I say wrong? And one guy says, do you go ask your dad for permission after your mother already gave it to you? And I said, no, what do you mean? And then he says, you've been given permission, now shut the F up and get to work. And it was very serious. And I had these two guys, once again, you can count the stars on their shoulders, staring at me, that I realized, oh my God, that's when I realized two other people that I met that were working with me, who they really were, like not just by their rank, but who they really were in context to what the whole UFO subject is. So it's an exciting place to be, but it's a little nerve-wracking.
We mentioned in the beginning about John Podesta. Now, you've interviewed Podesta. That's public information. That's publicly known. I don't know if you're saying that he's one of your advisors, but if so, that would be the only name that has been known. But I wanted to point out, as far as political and partisan connections, he would be the only one linked to any candidate or office holder in your group, right?
John Podesta is in my documentary and my docuseries. I think he's somebody that everybody needs to watch. That's all I'm going to say.
And like I said before, I have in my mind, you said there's no MJ-12 type organization. I have in my mind a smoke-filled room, and it's like Spectre from the James Bond movie, but there's no meetings. Hey, everybody, let's get together. You're MJ-1, you're MJ-2. That doesn't happen. It's compartmentalization, which is pretty much what you'd expect to happen with a topic like this.
Right. And I'm not going to say that I don't know if there is a group of 12 guys, 10 guys, 20 guys that manage all of it. I haven't asked that specific question yet. I've asked a lot of questions. In the docuseries, you're going to start to see all those. I'm going to start presenting all that stuff and laying it out, in chronological order, and people are going to learn a hell of a lot. But I haven't asked, is there a small group that manages this other than what I told you a few minutes ago where I said, is anybody standing back and looking at the big picture? It seems to me that, you got to think about this UFO phenomenon.
Hold on a moment, Tom. That's the Foo Fighters. That's what people used to call UFOs before they called them UFOs or UAPs, is Foo Fighters. Back with more of Tom DeLonge's disclosures here, including some of the big picture stuff. Who are these visitors? Where are they from? What are they up to? Whatever he can tell us coming up next on Coast to Coast. White Houses, the Animals from 1968. That band's still out touring around. I think they're coming to Las Vegas soon. We're talking with Tom DeLonge about this amazing journey he's on, people he is speaking to in and out of government who are sharing information with him about the inner workings of what we would all characterize as the UFO cover-up. The idea of full disclosure. Do we need to know all this stuff? How much does he know? What's the big picture? We're going to get into that in the next segment here on Coast to Coast AM. Tom, as a guy who's followed this topic for a long time, you know about disinformation. You know the history of the topic, how certain researchers have been led to believe that they're about to get some real solid stuff. I think Linda Howe was promised some video of a landing. Robert Emenegger, his film project years ago, we're going to give you the goods, the video of the landing. We're going to tell you the whole story. You know about the disinformation in New Mexico, and a lot of people don't think that the MJ-12 documents were created as part of a plot to confuse the Russians. How do you know you're not being used or led down a path?
Well, I think that's a good question. Number one, these guys didn't search me out. I haven't had, in my advisory group, I haven't had anybody that just kind of came out of nowhere and says, hey, I really want to give you something. It didn't work that way. It was through really interesting channels of how I met them, and some of which I've built relationships with that are very close and came from very kind of, in very sanitized ways, where I think, people wouldn't suspect that they don't have an interest in lying to me. They're not. If I was working with a big group from the CIA, I would be very weary of it. But all of my guys are, they're the channels that they work in. I should say guys and girls, but the places that they work and the divisions that they work in are more science-based, engineering-based, and defense-based, and something else I can't say. But
so they're not necessarily professional spooks who deal with stirring the pot and misleading people.
Exactly.
They're real, though. You've checked out the credentials.
Oh, yeah.
You know that they work in the places.
Oh, absolutely, because I've been to the places, and I've, I even attempted to read, I attempted to read something that one of these guys did, and it was like 20 pages of equations that you would think it's a joke. It was somebody's, is what they did there. When you get your PhD, you got to do your what do you call it, the dissertation or whatever it's called. I don't know what it's called, but
yeah.
It's just it's insanity, the level of how these guys operate. But I don't want to say they're not in intelligence. It's just the type of the intelligence arm that they're in is not counterintelligence based. It's I don't want to say that what it is, but it's space intelligence. It's
what is the operating agreement? What agreement do you have with them? You don't reveal their names or personal information about them, and do you have to clear the stuff that you release?
Absolutely, and I ask for permission. I don't, I'm not going to say who they are. I'm not going to, ever put at risk, anything that they, and also too, by the way, things they tell me that I have to release a certain way, respectfully, and in drips. Like, I set up a bunch of parameters of how I will put the information into this project and how I will put it out there so it does a couple things. It doesn't scare people and it gets traction with young adults. That's a very important point.
You know what you're up against, though. People will say, well, look, this guy's a rock musician. They're not going to tell this stuff to him, or they're going to tell him stuff that they have plausible deniability. I mean, part of that is the appeal, right? That if they wanted to, if this goes wrong, they can discredit you or deny it.
Well, they can do that to anybody. I mean, they do that to presidents. You're talking about, levels of power that we can't comprehend as civilians. So I'm not I frankly, I don't care if anyone, doesn't believe me. I'm in the middle of something very important. I just got to do what I said I'll do. And I think if I do it right, it's going to have some really good effects and hopefully ignite, other things that can happen within this discussion. But, plausible deniability is something the government has always done, and it's the way they operate, especially when they want to put out very serious information. With this topic, what they've done is they would leak things over the past 60 years and create ridicule for the people that may believe it. That way, everyone kind of hears the stuff. You hear about the Roswell crash, but you're not really scared about it because the chances are it might not be real, but maybe it could be real. But
like Area 51, flying saucers out at S4.
Yeah, exactly. It's all that stuff they want you to know. The reason we talk about it is because they chose for us to hear about it, and the reason we kind of laugh it off is because they, by design, that's how they do it. But they want people to know. They don't like the fact that they have to do all of this without people knowing what they're doing and how hard they're working at it. And what I said to a few of them, I was like, do you know what this would do? It would change who we elect in office. It would change the amount of money we appropriate and allocate to these programs. We would have the biggest space program that we've ever had, thousands of times bigger than Apollo, and it would be part defense and it would be part exploration, and people would run to be a part of it and help. It would be like the day after 9/11 where everyone wanted to sign into the military. If people knew what the stakes were, if they just knew what these guys are telling me, and once people know this stuff, and if it really caught fire and everyone knew it, that this was real, it would completely it would change everything. It would just change everything, how we operate as a country, how we operate in partnership with other countries, and what our civilization is doing. Because don't forget that, yes, we have cracked gravity, and yes, we are building machinery that have anti-gravity. And yes, I was told that. It's a big deal.
All right, let's talk about some of the stuff you were told that you can share. The biggest question, who are they? I mean, I think I said in the introduction that some people in your group refer to them not as aliens or the visitors, they refer to them as the others. Is there significance in using that term?
I don't know the significance of the others. The phenomenon is not used. Aliens is not used. It's the others, and when you're the way it's explained to me is that they are gods, with the little g. So the entire UFO phenomenon is about multiple gods that fight amongst themselves and by design factionalize mankind into different religions to step back and let us fight each other so it has other things that it wants to accomplish, and we don't notice them because we're too involved fighting each other. So, and they know that. So our government knows that. Our government knows that the others are instigating war amongst mankind. But the other issue is that these gods from you got to look back at ancient history and all those stories about gods that came down and did this and that. It's all true. So that's the other thing. You got to, and I'll get into that in the docuseries. There's some of that stuff I don't want to get into tonight, but the government is very aware that this intelligence is pitting different countries against each other based on religion, on purpose, and it's a scary scenario. So it's a multiple front war that we're fighting, because now we have to worry about each other and we have to worry about the others. So that's part of the reason for the secrecy, is we don't want everyone knowing our vulnerabilities, and we don't want everyone knowing the advancements we've made to protect everybody against multiple adversaries.
Well, multiple adversaries, some of them being humans, like the Russians. You mentioned earlier an incident that we've reported some of these kinds of incidents. I personally investigated them in Russia, about Russian ICBMs being activated after UFOs are over a base that are ready to launch, that somebody else is controlling them. We know that we've had incidents like that in our country. Is it somebody just messing with us.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And the scary thing is, and the way it's been told to me, is that we are trying to keep it secret so we don't get the conflict. We don't initiate a conflict where other people aren't, quote, considering the manipulations of the others. So it's like this really touchy dance that we've been doing for 60 years, trying to figure out who is being manipulated as a country more than the other. Not the others, but we just know that when you look at places, you got to think about this, for example. Now go back to when Bush came out and he's talking about Iran and North Korea and the axis of evil, and that's our government making a blanket statement that they're really concerned about these areas. Then you kind of go deeper into the parts of the government that know about the UFO phenomenon, the ones they call the others, the ones that are influencing countries, the ones that are by design or maybe by accident happening to crash a very advanced piece of technology in the country's borders so they make better weapons to fight bigger wars. And we're not the only ones that have had a crash. Yes, and so when we make big statements about North Korea or big statements about Iran or China, it's because we are aware that those places are being manipulated and have very advanced technologies now. So we're trying to keep everyone calm, and not initiate a conflict. So we're looking kind of over our left shoulder and our right shoulder, and at the same time, every once in a while, trying to tell everybody about it, but we can't really tell everybody about it. And I think that once people know this stuff, in whatever form, if everyone knew all this stuff, like they came out and told everybody this, from the White House, I just think people would want to help. I think people would say, "Oh my God, it's all been secret," for completely different reasons than ego-based reasons, like they don't want me to know, or I can't handle it, or they think they're better than me. It's like it has nothing to do with it. It's an act of war.
So the overall picture that we get filling in the blanks from what you've said tonight is that something sort of dropped in our laps back at the beginning of the Cold War. And the same kind of thing seems to have dropped in the laps of maybe the Russians and maybe others.
And, quote, potentially just to see who is stronger. And that's a scary thing. That's, quote, we don't know. But that's what that's literally how these guys have to think.
It's like a multi-level chess game or something.
That's exactly what it is. It's a multi-level chess game, and they have to sit back and go, what is the reason they just happen to have had a crash here? What is the reason there's a huge religious war going on right now? What is the reason that all of a sudden, China's defense budget has quadrupled in the past few years? It's all these things, and I think that creates a pretty stressful picture. And the other thing is too, they can't come out and tell everybody that all these religions that are firing all over the planet for the past thousands of years are based off things they saw in the sky. It's like that's gonna hit hard at home for a lot of people. It's gonna be hard to digest.
Charles Fort, the founder of the Fortean movement, he had a statement that he said after all the years of strange stories that he collected, he feels that we're property. And then I remember, just as an adjunct to that, right when I first started chasing these mysteries, there was a book called Gods of Eden by a guy named William Bramley, who wrote it and then just kind of went away, which sort of painted the picture that we are like cattle. We're an agricultural product. If you wanted to know why there might be reasons why some of the big picture is kept from us, I mean, people say they're ready to know the full picture. I'm not sure they are.
Yeah, I don't know if people are either. I do know, and as of 2 weeks ago, we all had suspicions about cattle mutilations being involved with the phenomenon. I do know that, yes, absolutely they are. And I mean, just a couple of days, they found, 10 or 20 elk lined up in the snow with all their jaws cored up and their genitals all cut out and the blood was missing, and the same exact thing that's been happening for decades. And that's creepy. That's demonic. That's evil, weird, scientific, dark stuff going on, and it's been happening for a very long time. And I think it would scare people that we might be property. We might be,
harvested.
Divided. You got to look at the big pictures. That what's happening right now is everyone believes something different about God, and we're all killing each other over it. And we all have advanced weaponry based off crashes that just happen to fall on our borders. And then while we're doing that, these things are zipping around and doing weird things with animals, doing weird things with people and abductions, and they're off, trying to accomplish something. You and I have had discussions about the pain and the anger and the emotional energy of all the war. Maybe there's something there that is something that they're interested in, the emotional side of things, and which is hard to think of, but it's still energy,
I can hear people sort of gnashing their teeth and thinking, well, this can't be true, therefore it isn't, which is sort of the same approach a lot of people have taken to UFOs in general. I don't think it's true, therefore I'm not going to give it any thought, and it can't be true, and so I've made up my mind. I get the feeling you're going to run into a lot of that. You
might, or I might, but I'm not doing this. I'm not stupid. I didn't walk off a gigantic rock and roll stage that was really easy living to jump into something that's very dangerous, deals with national security, and meet with a bunch of people in very clandestine ways, to write a bunch of very expensive, labor-intensive books and make a bunch of risky movies with a bunch of people in Hollywood that are frankly sometimes hard to get along with because it's a different culture than I'm used to. I didn't do all of that because I'm dumb. I didn't do all of it for fame. And so people have to realize that, and I think a lot of my fans know this stuff. They know that when I'm into something, I jump in head first, and I go all the way with it. This is gotta be the most important thing I've ever done. And if it works the way that I think it can work, it could be paradigm shifting. I was talking to someone the other day whom you connected me with about creating a user-generated way to ask my advisors questions from the people who so badly want answers that have been studying this stuff for decades like myself. I've asked some very, very big questions, but I think getting people involved and pushing questions my way to get some answers, I think would be really, really cool. And I'm looking forward to that.
I think we're going to open up the phone lines in the next hour, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of secrecy. And I don't know how far you're willing to go on that, but you'd agree with, we got like a minute before the break, but you'd agree that some of the things that are kept secret should not be kept secret. There are no legitimate reasons for it, right?
Oh, absolutely. I definitely think that. I was told that in the White House they would stamp. This is actually in John Podesta's interview. He says we would stamp things top secret just to make sure someone read it. Because people were so inundated with documents that even in the White House they would say just put top secret on it, then it'll make sure everyone will read that memo. So there's a lot of things that don't need to be secret. When Hillary Clinton was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night saying, hey, let's release all these UFO files except for the ones that have national security implications, well, it's going to be hard. There's going to be a lot of UFO stuff that they can't release because, like I said, it's an active war. It is a war, and it gets hot at times, and it's something they're dealing with every single day. I was told there's a very interesting story. About 36 months ago.
Hold on. That's a really good one. We're going to Jimi Hendrix taking us into the break, and when we come back on the other side, you're going to tell us this. We're talking with Tom DeLonge of Angels and Airwaves and Blink 182 about his project Secret Machines, and we've heard a lot of stuff here tonight. The idea that there is another intelligence operating among us that is referred to as the others, that they sort of mess with us, there are projects and people within government and outside of government that are trying to figure this stuff out. but the overall picture is pretty grim. You know, we folks who talk about UFO stuff on a regular basis, the subject of disclosure comes up. Hey, we're ready. We're ready. We know we can handle it. Tell us the full story. And it makes you wonder, you know, are we really ready for the full story? If the truth is that we humans are an agricultural product, are we ready to hear that? When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. I have one more story I want to hear Tom tell us, and then we'll hear what's on your mind as well here on Coast to Coast AM. So, Tom, before the break, you were going to tell us about something dramatic that happened 36 months ago. What is it?
There was an alert that went out that all of our nuclear weapons and the weapons that are at the tip of the spear for NATO, so it's all of NATO's weapons, that over a third of them were simultaneously being shut down within our oceans by UFOs that were zipping around and shutting these things down. And I think, you know, what's scary about there's actually another part of the story, and the mechanisms by which that keep a lot of those online come from space, and then those mechanisms in space were being shut down at the exact same time. So it had to do with space and the oceans. And they put together, I know somebody that had to go into a very secure location and go through all these different levels of security to go to another hidden location, and there was a guy in a suit that says you're going to lead an investigation on this and figure out what went wrong. And the team that was put together for this was like first-year staff, first-year soldiers, like a communication soldier and like a, you know, some enlisted guy, you know.
What?
And the whole point is that they didn't want to find the answer. So when NATO comes asking and all the countries come asking, like, who's shutting down all of our weapons, they would say, oh, we ran an investigation. We had this, you know, this hack team that we put together, and you know,
figure it out.
Really, yeah, it's just a big cover, you know, because they're actively working on it, but you know, they don't want people to know what the real work is, you know.
You know, what makes me worry even more is that whether it could be the Russians, that they've got some technology that these others gave to them just to mess with us.
Well, that is part of the story, and it's a very, very specific and clear part of the story that I've been given that I will be communicating, and that will be in the books, but the docuseries, I'll talk about that quite a lot. There is a major advancements that Russia has, that we have, that China has, based on technology that has either been given by design or given by accident. I personally, from everything I'm hearing, it seems to look like it was given by design. Once again, like I told you earlier, quote, to see who is the stronger, and that's a scary thought, you know, to give weaponry like that and to step back and say, now go kill each other, and we'll work with the ones that are left over. So like you said it the best. It is this crazy complex game of chess that's going on.
You know, we've been in this a long time, and I've been right there pounding the pulpit along with everybody else, saying we're ready for disclosure. Tell us the truth, end this cover up. And you have to step back and wonder sometimes, is that the case? And the longer people are in this field, some of the colleagues that I work with over the years, the people whose opinions I respect the most, all sort of gravitate to that position. Hey, maybe this is not such a good idea, because this stuff could be profoundly disturbing to get the full picture, that we might be an agricultural product, that there is some kind of entity that might as well be a god, or I'm thinking about the stories of Skinwalker Ranch that we've written about, where this thing at best is ambivalent, but it can do all kinds of stuff. It seems to feed off of fear. It can be very dark and threatening at times. I remember laughing at people who would say, it's not aliens, it's demons. I couldn't laugh anymore. I'm not so sure about that.
There is a very, very strong link between what people think demons are from the Bible and other religions, and the UFO phenomenon. And what you have is something that doesn't like man, period, and something that feels either jealous of or has some kind of plan for what man is to be. And that just makes it that much worse when you think about it. I have a quote here I should read you. It says, and this is from one of the advisors, "Would the link of aliens creating man, who then created God to keep us in our place, be something worth keeping secret?" Mind you, secret with a K, which is how we do secret machines. So I think so. We're talking about the biggest institutions on the planet and the world's major religions. It's bigger than just the big bad U.S. government, and going back to the Greeks and including Russians and Germans make it sufficiently global across centuries. Maybe evidence of disappeared ancient cultures, Easter Island, the Maya, the Inca. That's evidence of what happened for those who did not obey, thus encouraging the secret to be kept. And could the story evolve from how different groups of men exploited this technology to see how the entire secret is uncovered, rewriting world history and shattering many of our most well-regarded holy institutions, except this time when they come to wipe us out like the other ones, we are actually ready for them. And that readiness is another example why things have been kept quiet for so long and has been a strange international partnership indeed.
But now they're allowing some of it to dribble out. I would hope that some of your advisors are listening tonight.
I'm telling you that this whole story, and I remember when I got this specific communication, it made me feel more empowered. You know, we think that there's like this crazy conspiracy going on and this big cover-up, and maybe to some effect that's what you can call it, but really this is the sequence of events. In Germany, they had some crashes. They started doing some advanced work. In World War II, right after World War II, we had some crashes. Maybe Russia had some crashes. Everyone factionalizes around that period of time. Maybe China had some crashes. We cover the whole thing up. No one really knows about it. But what we really did is we went into these incredibly secret places, underground or whatever these bases are, places that are out in Nevada and all over the world, and we started working like crazy with the brightest minds, with huge amounts of money, with just with passion and with resilience and with everything at our disposal to come up with a way to protect everybody. You know, anti-gravity craft, different weapons and space, different psychological operations that we play on the public. You know, I think part of the cover-up is a psychological operation, so the UFO occupants themselves still think we know nothing about them, and I think that's part of the plan. It's part of it. You know, everything has been a big chess game to make the others not know how far along we've gotten to fight back, and I think that is something people need to know. And once again, I'm going to say it here, you know, I'm going to keep saying the same thing over and over again. You know, I think once people learn this stuff, they're going to lose a lot of cynicism about the government.